So we will now be moving into our first event of the regional advocacy trainings for the Prairies with a panel discussion on connection, community, and action. So I think we're going to welcome to this stage our panelists, which is very exciting. Oh no, sorry,
No, let's go.
yeah, okay. Sorry. Alrighty, so we are going to be welcoming Emily Eaton from the University of Regina. Kaitlyn Harvey from maybe I'll read everyone's name and then we'll get you all to come up. Kaitlyn Harvey from Climate Action Saskatchewan and Climate Justice Saskatoon. And Wright from Climate Justice Saskatoon as well. So if you could come up, that'd be wonderful. Yes, and Hannah will be moderating the panel. Hi, everybody. Do you guys want to maybe scoot a little bit? I feel like you're off to the side and you should be more center stage. These are easy scooting chairs, at least. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay. So hi everybody, good morning. As already introduced, my name is Hannah Muhadreen, and I am the National Campaigns Manager with Climate Reality Project Canada. So really happy to be here this morning with you all. Okay, let's get into it. Thanks for being here. Sorry, I'm going to be reading these questions off of my phone. So we're here today to talk a little bit about connection, community, and action. And each of you, as you'll talk a little bit more about, I think are working on climate and have been working on climate for some time, but you're all approaching it from kind of different directions and attacking different pieces of it. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear about how this kind of fits together, and also a little bit about what brought you into your work and the specific, I guess, like nature of climate work that you find yourselves doing, as well as a little bit about what keeps you going. So I'll just do a quick introduction, more in-depth introduction of each of you, starting with Emily. Emily Eaton is a professor in geography and environmental studies at the University of Regina. She researches the power and influence of the fossil fuel industry and pathways to energy transition that prioritize equity, deserving communities, and rectify Canada's unjust relationship with Indigenous peoples. She is the co-author of the 2023 book, The End of This World, Climate Justice in So-Called Canada, which I recommend. And she is also a community organizer dedicated to climate justice and Palestine solidarity. Next, we have Wright with Climate Justice Saskatoon. Lauren is a youth activist, climate activist, and litigant based in Saskatoon on Treaty 6. They began as a climate strike organizer locally and nationally through Fridays for Future and Climate Strike Canada. She has presented and published internationally, connecting the climate crisis with mental health and disability rights. They are passionate about building just communities that center youth and marginalized voices. Welcome, Lauren. Finally, Kaitlyn Harvey is a Métis geographer, lawyer, and researcher in the areas of climate change, human and Indigenous rights, and constitutional, administrative, and international climate law. She teaches legal concepts, instruments, and processes in resource management in the, I'm probably going to mangle this pronunciation. Do you want to say it? Okay.
If you could quickly pass the mic over just so the folks in Zoom can hear, thanks.
It's the Gunaway Pace and ASCII program.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. And that's at the University of Saskatchewan. Kaitlyn is a co-founder and director of the Saskatoon-based nonprofit Climate Action Saskatchewan. Kaitlyn has been involved in community development and climate action-oriented groups and initiatives in Saskatchewan for almost 2 decades. So let's dive into it. Maybe we'll just, for this first question, just pass the mic down this way. The first thing we're wondering about is, a little bit more about what first got you involved in the climate movement. So Emily, over to you.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here today and see everyone. So you heard a little bit about my biography, I guess. I actually don't really remember anymore what got me into the climate movement, but I'm old enough that it wasn't really a climate movement when I started. I did grow up in Saskatoon and I did my undergraduate on this campus, and I guess I was, that era of my childhood was at a certain point in the environmental movement where there was a lot of messaging that was moving into schools, mostly around like recycling, which is kind of funny because 30 years later, the messaging is still around recycling. From some corners anyways. And I remember that when I was on campus, we would be organizing around environmental issues. And I was always happy just to be able to be, I guess, with like-minded people working on something concrete. And that's been a constant for me in terms of like, whether it's climate, environment, or genocide or other things happening in the world, being able to be with people who are feeling in the same way as you are and trying to act in a concerted way together with I guess, a goal in mind in terms of being able to sort of mount small campaigns with wins that we can celebrate together. That sort of has been what I like about some aspects of the climate movement, and I guess what's sort of kept me in it for many years now.
For me, everything is framed in kind of a very recent lens. I think like a lot of young people, I feel like I'm super new to the table. I've only been doing this for 5 years, so very much I'm lucky to learn from other people who've been in the movement longer than I have, who've been doing this work for a long time and have made such great strides. So it's a real honor to be on a panel with these two who have done so much. For me, it really started in 2018, like a lot of young people, with the Fridays for Future movement. That was such a cultural moment, I think, for all of us, to kind of waking up to the role that youth can play in the climate conversation, the uniqueness of our situation, and really the fact that we hold power that we were never told that we hold. That was a real wake-up call for me, seeing people around the world who are my age, younger than me, a little bit older than me, taking these steps and making these sacrifices in their personal lives to stand for their beliefs. So that's really how I got started, was organizing some of the first events or speaking at the first events for Fridays for Future here in the city. And from there, I kind of decided to shift work to trying to bring Saskatoon's experiences and unique situation to the national and global strike movements, the uniqueness of being a prairie province, the challenges and the advantages that we have here as a role in climate activism, as a role as advocates. So that kind of became my main focus, all the while trying to build a youth movement here in Saskatoon with the Youth Climate Committee. So it's really been all about trying to bring perspectives that are not traditionally centered in climate circles, at least at the higher, more formalized levels. And I've kind of been focusing on that ever since, bringing intersectionality, bringing particularly youth and disability rights into the conversation. on climate solutions and how we want our just future to look to include all.
And thanks for those great comments. And, I was making some notes here as you guys were talking. I think, oh yeah, that's another thing that like reasons why I got involved with climate work. And, like when I started, it also wasn't because of, I didn't go to school. I didn't get started in this thinking that I knew what I wanted to do. I was just concerned and curious. So when I first, people were talking about global warming when I was in, high school and elementary school, and I didn't really understand what that meant. And then I went on an international exchange program, and I lived in Nova Scotia for a few months, and then in Cuba for a few months. And that really opened my eyes to living in, to different province, different part of Canada, coming from Prince Albert myself, which is a small community about an hour and a half north of here. It really opened my eyes to the challenges that we have, around the world and within our own community. To think, holy, like there's all of these issues, but there's all these people doing this really great work. And for myself from Prince Albert, we've got a lot of problems in my community, and it just gave me so much hope seeing all of these people doing all these great things and knowing that there's more than what was in my bubble. And so then after I came back from my exchange program, that's when I decided I wanted to learn more about this. So I went to university, and I had never had any intention of going to school, but I knew that I wanted to know more about this thing. So I started my path from the science perspective. I went to school to take an undergrad. Well, I was going towards an honors degree in geography with a minor in Spanish. I wanted to work in Environment Canada. I worked there for a year and a half as part of a co-op program, and I was like in the science and human geography world, and in learning from the likes of Emily Eaton, and going to events like the Saskatchewan Citizens Climate Hearings, which were really impactful for me, and getting to know these people doing this great work. Getting involved with Saskatchewan Eco Network and Climate Justice Saskatoon and different groups, SES, Saskatchewan Environmental Society, all these different groups around the province doing this really great work, which I got to see as part of my work with Saskatchewan Eco Network, which I'll come back to later on this afternoon. But getting to see all of this movement, it gave me so many ideas. And I was working in the science realm and making these great maps, or terrifying maps, of looking at the projected temperature and precipitation changes in the Beaufort Sea Mackenzie Delta region of Canada as part of the Mackenzie Gas Pipeline environmental assessment process. And knowing that I can make these great maps that show the change in permafrost and 10, 12 degree increase by the end of the century and complete melting of all of the ice caps. And I was horrified and terrified. And I had a kid and thinking like, I don't want to just keep making, reports that decision makers are not necessarily going to look at or do anything about. I wanted to know how I could use the law to protect myself, to protect my kid, to advocate for what I knew we needed to do differently. I don't know how we need to do it, but I know we need to do something different. And looking at what's happening around the world, I know people can live differently. We can do things better. So let's find out how we do that. But I wanted to understand the legal frameworks and structures that guided what we are, as a society. And information and education is so important, and training is so important, because you understand now how things work, and you understand the law, you understand the people, you understand the dynamics, and then you can use it to your advantage. And that's where your power really comes from, is education and networking. And, from going to law school, I went with this focus of how do I protect my community? How do I understand the law and use it as a tool? It took me on a long journey through a master's program. It got me into politics because I got frustrated with the slow legal process and wanted to get, in front of more people to say, hey, we've got this really big problem, but we've got a lot of potential. And you talked about, the potential in our networking and in our youth and in our sky and in our wind and in what we have here right now. And we're not talking about that. We haven't been. Well, we are more and more every day. And this environment here, seeing all your faces, like it just, this is what gives me hope. This is what keeps me going. And, you know, wherever you start, however you start, it doesn't matter. The fact is you're here, you're learning, you're talking to each other, and that is how we make change. So thank you for being here. And I just look forward to this great training program. I'm so glad that the Climate Reality Project came to Saskatoon. This is a big deal, guys. I'm just like, thank you so much for seeing the potential in Saskatchewan and the need to bring the spotlight to Saskatchewan. We need it and very much appreciate it.
Yeah. I can hear the round of applause. Thanks, Kaitlyn. Thanks each of you. That was great opening remarks. Yeah, I really liked, I feel like some themes like learning about the issues, connecting with the groups and people that are already active in this issue, and working on these issues. And then Kaitlyn, especially like talking about like then understanding like what are the skills that I need? What can I educate myself on in order to be the most effective that I can? Yeah, it was really great. Okay, so we know that community organizing is not all like thrilling victories and like great conversations, and sometimes it can be a little bit of a slog, and sometimes it can be really hard because we're up against really powerful forces and really difficult issues. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what keeps you going when things get tough. And we'll change up the order a little bit here. I'm gonna hand it to you first, Lauren.
I think things like this are really what keep me going. Again, it's so wonderful. Zoom is a great innovation. It did so much for the movement, but seeing people here in person is really what galvanizes me. It's been a combination, you know, growing up as part of a social media generation. That's been such a huge part of how I and other people my age have perceived a sense of community around climate change, particularly during the pandemic as well, having that kind of desire to connect with people, desire to keep up the momentum that we had, and then kind of lag time between being able to actually act on issues and to be safe. It's a mass disabling event, the pandemic, which is something we're still in. So for me, yeah, anything that keeps me going is not necessarily motivation towards the issue that does exist. You know, of course, I'm passionate about this. I've devoted a significant portion of my life up to this point to doing the work, to educating myself, to understanding. But the key, I think, to this movement's formation and success and continued movement into the future is our ability to connect with each other, our ability to face this giant, scary, glaring deadline that we have, and to face it together, to face it united, to acknowledge that we're scared, that we're anxious, we're feeling all of these things, and that feeling is part of the process for this issue. It's not something that we can separate trust me, I've tried doing science, doing biology to separate myself from the issue, but it's just not possible. It's life. It's our life on this planet. It's our life with each other. And that is what keeps me in it, is that desire to advocate for humans, for animals, for all of us that are connected in a web that we could never untangle. And seeing people who are also passionate, who are also concerned, that's what helps me continue doing any kind of work.
Yeah, I definitely agree 100%. You know, getting into rooms like this and having these conversations, verbalizing thoughts that, you know, you've had and questions that you have no one to talk to and talk things out with, or you think you don't. Especially in a place like Saskatchewan where it is, it's pretty toxic sometimes, oftentimes. You know, anybody who wants to have a conversation about climate, it's politicized and it's, you know, it's a hot button issue. And so it can be really isolating in this province, especially when you have questions. And if you ask them, people look at you like an alien or treat you like you're stupid, or try to keep you quiet. People will try to keep you quiet and know that though. That's another thing that like, what keeps me energized is kind of the opposite of thinking that, I know I'm right. And I know what's in my heart, and I might not be right all the time. I might not be right about absolutely everything. In fact, I'm often not. And happy to be corrected by somebody who does actually know the answer, which we also need to be, open to more of. Is listening and being wrong. But know that I'm here, this is soul work. And I'm here for my own reasons, which aren't another person's reasons. And so, taking your time, pacing yourself, things like that to keep you energized. You can't just always stay energized. This is draining work. So you have to take that time to also unplug and charge up again. And, knowing that, I'll just kind of follow up on your point about this deadline. I don't see it that way. I see it as things are changing. Things have always changed. Things are going to keep changing. And we can't really control that at all. But we can control what we do with ourselves while things change and what we want to see that change look like. And we can take steps to be part of that change and to push it in a direction we want it to go, or we can not, and hope that things will get better on their own. I'm not that kind of person. I'm a doer. And I know that my efforts and your efforts being here today makes a difference. And so, there's no deadline in terms of like, the world isn't going to just done, we're all going to be here and we're all here together. And Saskatchewan's a small province. Canada's a small country in terms of people. You network, you run in campaigns, you meet people, you lose, you've made networks. That's a win. You have built your community, and that's a win. And at the end of the day, that's all we really have is ourselves and our communities and our families, and making sure that we're taking care of each other and supporting one another. Because that's what it's all about. So don't be afraid of things changing so much that everything is gonna end, because that fear will keep you back. It will hold you down. And I know I can speak from experience. I'm kind of going over time, but I'll just share this one story of when I was in second year law school. I kind of had a bit of a breakdown with all of this stuff because I'm trying to learn the law about what are all the problems with it and how can we change it in order to make things better. And I was sitting in a subway, and I often had to leave home to go do my homework because I had a little one at home, and I was doing some homework. And when I went and got a sub, and the lady put it in a plastic bag, I was like, I'm going to be sitting in to eat, but she gave me this plastic bag, and I was like, plastic, like, this is so unnecessary. I'm not going anywhere. I don't need this bag. And I like lost it. I started crying because I was just like, what are we doing? And, I'll never forget that. And I mean, I've had several of those moments over the years. Where things just get so much and you just kind of like, just let it out. And you got to do that. And you got to do it with people who understand, because otherwise, like I said, it's very isolating. And other people are feeling the same way. So, having those conversations makes it, you can carry this burden of knowledge, because knowledge is a burden, it's power, but it's also heavy to wear this, this fate, this reality that we have, but wear it with like knowing that everybody's got their thing that they have to deal with. Every generation has an issue, and this is our issue, and we got to figure it out. And we're not going away, and things aren't ending overnight. We're all going to be here tomorrow, the day after, year after year. This is not a race. I mean, it is a race, but it's also just take things day by day and try not to let the big things or the small things get to you, because if you're not careful, they could, so be kind with yourself.
Thanks. I guess I want to affirm what both of you were saying about Saskatchewan, but also the prairies in general, maybe a little bit less in Manitoba because they don't have as big of an oil industry, although they do have one. But these are really difficult places to do this kind of work, I think. And although I've been involved in various different things over the last decades. I can say that most of the organizing work that I've done and that I've felt the best about and that has made the most impact is not in the realm of climate change. And I think like it's been really difficult to sustain anything in Saskatchewan in particular. I think Alberta's doing a little bit better in that regard, but and it is, I think, largely due just to the power and the influence of the fossil fuel industries here. The fact that our politicians, but not just our politicians, most everybody feels not like an independent person. And so I take sort of my responsibility as an academic with academic freedom, that like I can't get fired for speaking about the oil industry or about climate change. So I take that really seriously because I know that there are a lot of people who feel at least very afraid and compromised and beholden to their employers, their people in their families and their networks and all of that. So all of that just to say that what keeps me going in that sense, I guess, is I don't want to say surround yourself only with like-minded people, but I think that you need I think everyone needs a group of people that have your back and that you can draw energy from and that you can make, I don't want to think too linearly here either, but that you can make change with, I guess. I was going to say progress, but you can make change with, and those actions that you do together are very affirming of like who you are, your role in the world, etc. But they have to also connect with other people and they have to bring more people into the movement. And I think that's the really challenging part because I've spent times in rural oil producing province communities in the province, talking to lots of different people. And you know, there's a lot of good tools. Like I'm thinking right now about the sort of spectrum of allies tool. And I've started to think like, should I be spending my time speaking to those people who are probably never going to change their mind? And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's probably better to speak more often and in more depth to the people who actually might change their mind. They're somewhere in the middle and they could actually be moved. And so I think it is time for the movement to like think really strategically about where we're investing our efforts and what kind of movement we can see, a shift in like public opinion, what kinds of sort of wins we can have that shift the needle a little bit in terms of these very difficult places like Saskatchewan, because we need some. And as I started off saying, like the most affirming and effective, I think, organizing work I've done in the last decade has actually been not related to climate change, but around something called the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And we started as just a very small group of people committed to a particular idea. And now, about 5 years later, we have about 55 landholders in our network with over 50,000 acres of land. And these are people that are landholders that are opening their land to Indigenous people to exercise their inherent rights. And that kind of work feels good because there's a tangible thing that's happening. And it's not everything we need, right? The crown's not at the table, like it's just small landholders, but you can feel the sense of things shifting. And one of our goals is also to sort of shift thinking in rural areas of the province too. Like if your neighbor has, instead of a no trespassing sign, if they have a Treaty Land Sharing Network sign that says Indigenous hunters welcome, that creates conversations in places that we need to have them. And so I'm trying to think like none of these issues are unconnected. So when I say it's not climate change work, well, it is also climate change work by a certain definition, but it's not about, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. directly. But it is within the realm of work that we need to do to make the right changes. And so the last thing I was just going to say is read books. That keeps me going too, is expanding the way I think about climate and the work that we need to do, the strategies that we need to have. And so Hannah, you mentioned the End of This World book. That was a really interesting project for me because I did work with a team of 5 other authors, and well, even in advance of that project, but I've been doing a lot more reading and thinking about treaties and the ways in which they are potentially like a really powerful climate change framework. And I think we need to, you know, expand the way we think about climate work, and some of that is through just being curious and exploring and the lifelong journey that we're on. So that's sort of the individual work, although it can also be conversational. It can be in conversation with other people. But I do think climate activists need that group of in-person strategic organizing in groups of people that we trust, and that we can see the results of our work. I think that all is crucial for any sort of long-term, being in it long-term. Wow, such a rich, no, not long at all. Yeah, that was such a rich set of answers, and my mind is, I'm like trying to digest all of this while I'm thinking about the next question. Yeah, this is all very, very great. And of course, this is what you're talking about, the importance of relationships and how that's important to keep going. And that's exactly why we're here and why we're hosting this training on the prairies, and also talking about specific issues and barriers that people on the prairies face. Is that, yeah, we're hoping that people can find each other and connect with each other through this today, as well as the rest of the training. So, the next question, we have like attending the training both in person and online, quite a I think diverse array of people. Some people have been involved with this work for years. Some of you could probably also be speaking on this panel, and some of you, a lot of you, thankfully, are also really new to the movement and just getting started. And so this next question is kind of for you guys. Could you talk a little bit about if you are just getting started today, what advice would you have for someone in that position? And Kaitlyn, you haven't started yet.
I guess, you know what I kind of spoke to at the last comment about like really loving yourself and being patient with yourself and with others. You know, there are a lot of people who come to this work for very passionate reasons. You know, there's a lot of energy and emotion sometimes, and people have their understandings, their level of knowledge, their reality, right, that they come into this space from. And you're not always going to agree, and that's okay. So like, if you can find a way to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, you should do that, because pushing yourself to be the one who can say, it's okay, guys, you know, let's take a step back, or I see what you're saying, but have you know, this person's saying that, and we're all here for the same reasons. So let's stop, you know, focusing so much on maybe how is the best way to move forward. And if it gets to the point where sometimes it does, where in Saskatchewan, the environmental movement in general, there's different ideas about the way we need to move forward. Sometimes people are very firm in their positions. And, you know, as somebody, for myself, I trained quite a bit in interest-based dispute resolution in law school, really focused on mediation and negotiation, but interest-based negotiation, which is really asking, you know, take a step back and ask why people are saying the things that they're saying. And we all, you know, usually have the same set of like 4 or 5 things that drive us. we have common ground, even if somebody is from a different country or looks different or different age or different level of experience or whatever. We all have our same key, like, human needs and concerns. And so don't let perceived differences keep us apart, because, you know, that's gonna hurt us and hold us back. So yeah, just really being patient with yourself and with others. And also, you know, mistakes are great. But don't be afraid to make them, but be willing to learn from them. And so for myself, I kind of just mistake my way through life and just try and do this and see if it works. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And you go, okay, well, I learned this, and don't do that next time and next thing. And I can be, you know, I'm quite chaotic myself. We're talking about having a support system. MJ back there, who we're twinning today, that's my rock. You know, I have my support system, people who keep me going and keep me grounded. But knowing that, you know, the way that we work in our relationship and with our group, we give people space to say, are you comfortable with this? Can you do this? Do you have capacity? If not, that's okay. Let's change it up. Let's see, what do we have capacity for? So set goals and things that you want to accomplish, but be willing to move on those and be flexible and go in a different direction, because this is a very complicated area, like I said, with lots of emotion and lots of changing things. You know, if you follow the news with our politics and federal, provincial laws, this is an area that's very contentious, and so just be flexible, and you'll be fine. And then also, I always think of what my dad tells me. He says all the time, when I'm upset about something, he says, well, you know, it is what it is. And I say, sometimes, you know, that makes me feel like, okay, I can just let it go, because it's just going to be what it's going to be. You know, there's only so much you can do, and you can't hold responsibility for this big problem. You know, you just can't. You just got to let things go sometimes, and know that sometimes just getting out of bed and taking care of yourself and getting groceries and feeding your kid and not being late for meetings, you know, if you can do that, sometimes that's all you can do, and that's fine. But also the flip side of this idea of it is what it is it is what it's going to be. You know, if you don't do something, it's not going to be that thing. And so it's not just about it is what it is and put your hand up and go, huh, you know, but it is also what it isn't. So if you're not putting that effort in, if you're not making those changes or taking those steps, it will never be that thing that you hope it is going to be. You have to do something in order to be part of that change. In order to, you know, whether or not you ultimately get the thing that you're working towards, you've at least taken a step. You've been part of that, and it really gives you, you know, a chance to pat yourself on the back and know that you have done something. And you can't do everything. You can only do a couple things, and so pick them. You know, try to not overdo it. Burn yourself out. That's another issue. Be very careful of in this work, is burning yourself out. And just you know that every phone call makes a difference. Every poster, every sign up that goes on a farmer's yard that tells people this is a safe place for Indigenous people to hunt, people see that, get that message in their brain. That makes a difference. And, you know, so when I ran for leadership of the Saskatchewan NDP, and that was not because I expected to win, but because I knew that people wanted to talk about these issues, and I wanted to put them out there and give people, create space for these conversations to happen, and to see who was really interested in having these conversations, to be serious and bring it up to that level of, this is credible, this is an issue, this is something that we need to be talking about at that level. And no one else is having those conversations, not, you know, at that level that people are having to listen to you, because we have a lot of that in Saskatchewan, where the media or, you know, people in general just don't want to talk about that, and they kind of shut that out. So this is my opportunity to get on the biggest stage I could find myself and get a microphone and say, hey, Saskatchewan, wake up. And get off your butts and do something about this. And you want to just sit back and complain, or you want to make a change, because change starts here. That was the slogan for my campaign. You know, it starts here every day. And that change sometimes is just picking up a phone call and calling a friend and checking in on them. And sometimes that's calling up a voter and saying, hey, you know, can we count on your vote? Can we count on your support for this campaign, political or not? You know, making that effort to connect with people and giving people an opportunity to connect with you is that energizes me, that fuels me, that keeps us going. And I can see the networks, the mapper in me can see these things every time I go out. And it fills me with so much hope. And if you're, you know, getting started, don't lose hope. You know, you might lose faith in our current governments and the current political parties and the way things are right now, but don't lose hope. Because that's the one thing that, like, they can never take away from you. No one can take away from you. You are in charge of whether or not you have hope. And I have hope every day that things will be better, because I can see things being better. So thank you for being here. And just, you guys give me hope.
Sorry. For me, I think all of it very much resonates with what you were saying about empathy for others. That's what it really boils down to for me. And not only empathy for others for the situation they're in, you know, they might be in a position where they're not financially able to commit a whole bunch of time to activism. That's okay. They might have health issues. That's okay. So it's empathy for others and also empathy for yourself. Because in my experience, at least, I got involved at a time that felt very all or nothing. You know, we finally had influence in the media. We finally had politicians paying attention to us. And that kind of led to me giving more of myself to the movement than I could, that I rapidly burnt out, that I was dealing with my own health problems, and I wasn't really making space for myself to deal with that, to take care of myself first. When you're getting into something, you can become so wonderfully overwhelmed with possibility, with a desire to jump right in, to get to work, to learn, you know, how you can be an asset, but also how you can help other people. And I think for me, I would really warn that you want to stretch that out as much as you can. It's wonderful to have that kind of optimism, to have that kind of energy for the work, to not, for lack of a better analogy, have it beat out of you, essentially, by the current political system, by people who are going to deny climate change or who are going to become volatile when you try to have a conversation with them. Those are important conversations to have, but ultimately you really need to look out for yourself as well. Especially with an issue like climate change, it's such an existential crisis that if you don't watch out, your mental health can take a really big hit. That's something that was a big issue for me and led to me having to take 6 months off of organizing, is I'd gone so hard that I'd let go of what I valued. I was just trying to do as many campaigns as I could, to get as much media attention to these campaigns, to get as many people involved, signed up, engaged as possible, and really putting to the wayside not only my own well-being, but the maintenance of my values and allowing those values to lead me as I went. When I was 15, I decided, thanks to my cousin Glenn here, to sue the federal government for climate negligence on charter rights, especially for young people. And well, that's been such a huge galvanizing thing for me. I'm kind of looking back and realizing, well, maybe I wasn't in the best place mentally at the time to be doing that. You know, that's a big thing to bite off at 15 years old. I'm so grateful that I did it, because it's been wonderful for me to see that progression and to make what feels like tangible change to the legal system based on being able to set precedent in an area with essentially no legal history. on the specific matters that we're challenging in court. But I think trying to do that, trying to be a student, do extracurriculars, be involved with climate work here at home, really end up combining into a situation that just burned me out. So as you're getting involved, I think the key is to sit down with yourself, to ask yourself, what's my capacity? What do I have to give and what do I need to keep for myself? Because if you don't keep something for yourself, you're not going to be an asset to any movement because you're going to be burnt out, you're going to be unhappy, you're going to be unhealthy. And having that kind of thinking that you're making that sacrifice of your personal well-being for the greater good of the movement ultimately is going to come back and cause more harm than good because you're not going to be present and you're not going to be able to continue educating yourself and others to continue building on your work if you have gotten yourself to a point where you physically cannot do it. So I think having real empathy and understanding, this is something I'm trying to work with for mental health and disability awareness within climate circles, looking at how this work and also just existing in this time as a human is incredibly difficult. There's a constant barrage of news, of things that are negative, especially here in Saskatchewan with our current political situation. Looking at like when there was the pronoun policy put in place, that was a really difficult time for a lot of us. Trying to grapple with what that meant. So you need to really realize that this is a turbulent time to be a human being. It's a tough time to be a person, not just an activist, not just someone worried about climate change, just someone trying to get by. And once you have empathy for that in yourself and others, you'll be able to do constructive work for your community, for your movement, and for yourself.
Excellent. I'll try to be quick. Are we trying to wrap up here? Okay. I just wanted to say I want to start, I guess, with one story. So in 2018, I was at the council meeting in Regina when the council unanimously passed this motion to make Regina 100% renewable by 2050. That was actually at the time an amazing feat because it was the previous council. There was only like one climate ally on that council. It was the result of a long campaign supported by Cameron Esler that you're going to hear from later today, I think. And it was a very effective campaign. Nobody thought it would actually pass in council. Since I could have all sorts of critiques about what's happened since, but I'm going to stay in the 2018 moment for a second. And a lot of us were in the council chambers, and it was a huge victory in that moment. And people were celebrating. The council meeting was over, and I left. It was in probably October. It was cold out, but not like it was fall. And I left the council or the city hall, and there were a bunch of people gathered outside. People who've been working on the left in Regina for years and years and years, like people like Florence Stratton, who's at least I don't know how old she is. She might be in her 80s or late 70s. Long time activists, people like her who were gathered around and they were celebrating, but they were also saying, we've been working on issues of homelessness and drug toxicity and racism for decades, and we've never been able to force council to pass anything progressive on these issues. And now there's this group of young climate activists who were able to get unanimous support from the council on this issue of climate change. And so while they were celebrating and supporting the passing of this motion, they were at the same time asking themselves why this issue and not others? and feeling a little bit, I don't know what the right word is there. So that got me thinking that, if the leaders of this, that were pushing for this motion and then for the implementation of it afterwards, if this group of people wasn't able to connect climate change to those issues, homelessness, drug toxicity, all these issues that people have been organizing on the left for in a steadfast manner over decades, that they were going to lose that support. And so I think one of the things that I see in the climate movement today, and that I think is really important, is that young people do generally understand like the intersection of all of these issues, and that they are of one and the same cause, and that they can be sort of tackled together. But I do also see, and I think it comes more from like the NGOs and the sort of policy wonky type folks who are very concerned about like only the molecule of CO2 and only about greenhouse gas emissions and how to reduce them, and like this very narrow approach to climate change. So I think one of the strengths of today's youth is that in one corner they can see these interconnections. And I think that when we win on climate, like the only way we win on climate is if it's also about broader social justice issues. If it also addresses poverty and homelessness and all of these other things, right? But I also see at the same time that especially like youth are, because they're hyper aware, I think, of the intersections of gender, race, disability, all these things that we need to be thinking about in our movements. There can sometimes be a feeling of getting stuck. So many things to consider. What if I make mistakes? As I heard Kaitlyn say, and what should we actually do? Because all the issues are in front of us. And so I think my message is just that like we need to be able to understand all those links, and we need to be able to have climate strategy that addresses those issues and puts them front and center. But we need to do it in a way that doesn't make us stuck. And so this is just my plea for like a little bit more thought and attention to strategy and to what is going to actually, where we should put our efforts specifically. Because I do think, as I've said, like we need to feel some momentum at this time. Part of like the mental health like crisis in climate activism, I think, is that we're putting a lot of energy in and we're not really seeing a lot of benefit. And that is hugely distressing for us, like mentally, psychologically, in our wellness more broadly. And so like I do think that also the younger generations should engage and learn from some of the strategical thinking of I'm not saying all the older generations have all the strategical thinking, but like there is a history of organizing and campaigning and understanding what does and doesn't work, and that needs to be united with these sort of movements that are really understanding the intersections of all of these crises and trying to address them.
Great, thank you each so much. Yeah, again, a lot of really good stuff there, thinking about avoiding burnout. Kaitlyn, I really liked, I noted down what you said about just getting comfortable with discomfort. I think that's great advice for life in general, probably. And and Emily, like both that balance of like, before you dive in, understanding who's there and what have they been working on and what's the history here, while also kind of like marrying that fresh, like new energy with some of the lessons learned. All really good. Thank you. We had one more question, but I know that we're almost at time. Adrian, I wasn't sure what that just meant.
Oh, that was, let's see if we can get a question from the audience. Like maybe if we
Great.
could have 3 questions, one in the room, one on Zoom, and one concluding remarks and just have one person volunteer to answer each one. How does that sound?
Yeah, great. We're gonna have a question period, take some questions from folks here as well as online. Anybody here? Yeah, here. I'll walk the mic over to you.
Thank you for the panelists, and Emily mentioned that we have to really put a strategy, I think, where to put maximum effort. I just want to maybe if you can say a little bit about networking, how important it is to include those issues that you mentioned, not only climate change, but also justice and poverty issues. With my interest too is environment, food security. What is the importance of networking? Because it is almost impossible for one group to achieve goals that we try to achieve.
A question about networking and relationship building. Yeah, Emily, do you want to take that one? It was directed to you, or Kaitlyn, great.
Yeah, thanks. Great question. It's imperative, you know, that we are working together and getting each other's contact info, getting each other's email addresses and phone numbers and social media, and making sure that we know who each other is or who each other are. One of the things that when I was involved with Saskatchewan Eco Network, which was quite a while ago, one of the things that our organization did was we acted almost as an umbrella organization for Saskatchewan, and any environmental group in Saskatchewan could sign up to be a member of SEN, and we would have events and awards nights and activities that would bring people together who are on our list, the different groups. Also on the website, you could go there and get the phone number or email address for all these other groups. And we had a newsletter that went out that told people about what other people were doing. And we had a change in federal government with Stephen Harper, and that gutted funding for nonprofits. And SEN eventually ran out of money to be able to continue operating. So I was on the board when it ended. But there's still this need to fill that, or you know, to have some more an umbrella organization. There's a lot of different groups that I see and people that I've met across the province doing really great work. And a lot of people don't know each other exist and what they're doing. And then they hear about what's happening in other parts of the province and they go, holy crap, that's a big problem. And look at these people doing this really great work. I work with quite a few people as part of the Forest Protection Network. And so there are groups up in northern Saskatchewan that are really working hard on forestry issues and, you know, protecting wetlands and just doing a lot of things that they need help. And I see this need in a lot of the groups that I talk to, people that I talk to, that they're doing these things, but capacity is always an issue. And then I come to events like this where I meet people and they're like, tell me how I can help. And I think, oh, I wish I could just let you know what is happening and all these other people doing this great work and connect you guys. So Saskatchewan, the Eco Network, that function that we filled, I'm really hoping Climate Action Saskatchewan can do that. Or be one of the groups doing that, because I know there are other groups in Saskatchewan also doing this community building work, but work with them, bring in my connections, the things that I know, people that I know, issues that I'm aware of, and give a platform for people to engage and find out about these issues and then figure out how to get involved. And so networking is so important, and then making sure that training and building capacity for you're getting involved, but what are you doing? Is really important too, so that you're not just coming to meetings and not doing anything, right? You need to have a plan and a strategy. Thanks.
Thanks, Kaitlyn. Some really specific and concrete ideas there. Okay, so we have a question from somebody attending online. And they ask, what do you see as the top 3 issues relating to climate change? So I think it sounds like this is a question about, is it how does climate change intersect with other issues?
Some examples they provided were water, oil, CO2, big
Okay.
oil paying its share. Elizabeth McCauley adds peat mining, soil disturbing. As you can see, it's a great
Okay, okay,
symphony.
so it's more like within the umbrella of things that are climate change, what are some of the top 3 issues? So, who wants to take a stab at that question? Lauren? Great. If another one of you wants to chime in too, then you can do that. Here you go.
We're having some confusion about who's gonna answer the question. Well, narrowly, I guess, most of the greenhouse gas emissions in the world come from the fossil fuel industries, so the most pressing thing that needs to happen is that fossil fuels need to be phased out. And that includes all of them, like oil, gas, LNG, hydrogen that is basically produced through natural gas. So that, like, from a sort of purely, like from a narrow point of view, I think is like the most pressing thing, right? Is that we need to figure out a way to not just replace fossil fuels and phase them out, but also reduce our overall energy consumption so that the impacts of renewable energies don't destroy the planet either, right? So we need to use less and also decarbonize. But that's a really narrow answer, I think. And so, and I see that our elder or our knowledge keeper had his hand up too, but I think, like I mentioned a little bit earlier about how I'm starting to think about it a little bit also through treaty. And so I think some of the things like inherent Indigenous rights to hunt and fish and gather plants and medicines and practice ceremony, that is also like a framework through which climate change needs to be addressed, because in order for those rights to exist, you have to have habitat. And that habitat is also carbon sequestration. And we also need to, like, as part of that, be able to relate to each other in ways that are about like mutual coexistence and political autonomy between communities. And so I see, I guess, like, if I was gonna say most widely then for this particular space, what I would prioritize, it would be treaty implementation.
Yeah, the big one that jumped out to me is just extraction as not only a practice, but as a mindset of refusing to realize the very finite resources we have at our disposal and the resources that are not ours to take. When that comes up to a lot to land use, to oil companies deciding that, their right to profit comes over the right to existence, the right to land, the right for Indigenous peoples to occupy their territory and use it as they traditionally have. So I think that can really encompass all 3 points, just extraction and extraction-based mindset that, resources are meant to be taken, not meant to be protected or renewed.
I wanted to point out too that, a lot of the conversation is about what we shouldn't be doing and not about what we could be doing. And so really talking about our potential in Saskatchewan for solar, for wind, for geothermal. We have so much potential, and by not talking about it, no one knows exactly what we could do. We know that Saskatchewan, Sask Power just approved a 100 megawatt solar farm the other day. Or is it 1,000 megawatt or something? It's supposed to be able to eventually power 25,000 homes. Is that right? My number's right? The geothermal, deep geothermal, this is out by Estevan. They got the solar plant going up. They got a geothermal plant going up. That's gonna provide heat for 25,000 homes. Why are we not talking more about that? Why are we still building new unabated natural gas power plants in Saskatchewan when we have so many other things we could be doing? And that's why the Saskatchewan government is getting sued, and hopefully they get put in their place by not Saskatchewan courts, then, Supreme Court of Canada, if it push comes to shove. Because our politicians need a wake-up call, and, someone needs to give it to them. And we're doing everything we can as citizens, and we need our courts to step up for us and protect us and protect our rights, and tell the government, what is and is not acceptable. And sorry, I'll end it there. I had one more thing that I wanted to add, but I'll stop.
Thank you, each of you. Elder Duquette, did you want to add some comments?
Again, thanks everyone, and I like the panel. Their input is very informative. The thing with in our culture, we were the guardians of the land. We were the conservationists, and then we were doing such a good job that we're not used anymore in that line of preservation. We have groups in our communities now that are called guardians. And also we have people that are, land-based training that we do with our youth, and also the community members. And when you start working in that capacity of grounding our people, they're more aware, what is around them. Like in my community back home, I don't live there, but I live in the city here, where I work here at the university. What we do is we have people that are engaged into the land-based training, and we have students that go from here to our community. We're trying to eliminate any power vehicles or boats in our lakes, and we're doing such a good job that it's one of the most pristine lakes you can find. We have a community-based training facility, like a camp, we call it, I guess, for a better word. And we have people come there, not just to cook anywhere. It's more to understand what is it that available, like game, for example, fish, to establish a diet. That's one of the most important things, because diet, it creates, society that are dependent on the farmers, for example, and they destroy a lot of that land with pesticides, insecticides, whatever. And also to understand, they're harming the land so bad that they start putting chemicals in there, to create, faster growth of product. And I think they're the worst offenders, I find, in my observation. And I think that's somewhere where there's got to be a line drawn, that that's farming, it's always the same land, the fertilizer, what they use in there, it's really contaminating the soil. And the seepage that goes underground and through rain or through the snowfall, it destroys that land. It goes into the lakes, the rivers. Why can't people understand that? They're the ones harming everything. Regulations, and the laws that they put, like the trespassing law. Now there's a safety net there for them that whoever drives on my land or comes to pick anything, they're going to get shot. That's the reality. We're going back to the old system of outlaws. And I think that's the word. They're the worst offenders. It's and the government protects them because it's a commodity that they create. The money drives, But us, it's more the humanness of clear cutting as well, that creates a lot of that erosion. The the tree, they don't replant trees or anything, shrubs, or, you know, to regrowth, eh? You know, like the tunnels, you know, that the wind tunnels that are created, they're creating and it comes right to our land, eh? To anywhere in the province, eh? Because it travels, eh? The wind travels and it picks up speed as the tunnels are, you know, pushing that, you know, like a throttle, eh? And this is what we learned, eh? Through science, not through science, but our Aboriginal science thinking. We have our own way of identifying what it is out there that's gonna, you know, create a balance, eh? Nothing yet. And that's what I talked about this morning, eh? Is that balance of understanding. You know, why is it that we're not utilized in certain ways, but now we're going into our Aboriginal community schools more so to teach. We don't take the academia so much, but the importance is creating a humanness, you know, because our land is human. It's a human nature, eh? It's real and alive. So if we damage it more, then we're in trouble. So that's my, you know, little take. Hopefully I didn't take too much of your time because time is always a very essential. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you to each of our panelists. I think we're gonna wrap it up there. This has been a really rich, I think, and invigorating conversation to start off the morning. And next, we're gonna be diving into a little more strategy and finding your place in the movement with Sarah. But first, I think we might take a little bit of a 5-minute break. Great, okay. And you can grab some snacks, grab some coffee, but yeah, thanks again to each of you for joining us and sharing your thoughts this morning. Really good.